Welcome back, everyone, to the Fly Culture podcast. I'm Pete Tigers. We're recording this one on the 15th of May. We've had a shed load of rain. I'm waiting for that river to drop back. I'm hoping there might be some salmon in the system. Fingers crossed I can get out perhaps tomorrow or the day after and swing some flies. So I'm really, really looking forward to that. I'd like to do a little shout out to Justin Can. I hope you're okay, buddy. I hope you're hanging in there, and I'm thinking of you. If you're into fly fishing, my guess is that you've probably visited the deeply funky, the deeply cool Mouching website. And if you haven't, you should. My guest today is Cyril Kamir. He's the brains behind Mouching. I'm looking forward to seeing what goes in to keep a well-populated site relevant and up-to-date, along with the story of how Mouching began. It's a really fascinating story. As well as this, I'm hoping to talk with Cyril about fishing, music, and perhaps some cigars too. So it is my great pleasure to welcome Cyril to the podcast. Cyril, great to have you here. How are you doing?
Hello, Pete. Hello, everyone. I'm really pleased and thrilled to be on your broadcast. I'm sorry my English is not perfect, but I'm going to try my best to be with you and be understood. That's the most important.
I know we've been talking for a fair time off mic, and there's no complaints from here, so you're coming through really loud and clear. I feel like I've known you for so long now, and I was deeply touched that when we launched the magazine Fly Culture in London, you were seeing if you could get things together to come over and join us at the party as well. And sadly, things didn't align for you at the time, but I was deeply touched by that. And it's great to actually catch up with you and speak to you after, as I said, it feels a long time I've known you.
Yes, I've been following your blog for a very long time. I don't remember how long. And I thought that I was reading someone I knew, and the way you spoke about fly fishing, the way you shared your vision of fly fishing was the same vision I had. So I felt connected instantly. And I think it's a tremendous adventure to launch a magazine. We're planning to launch one here. This is a big surprise that nobody knows, but now everybody will. We're trying to launch a French magazine on fly fishing maybe this year. And I think when you make an effort in our fly fishing little world, you need to be supported, because who else would but us? We're like cousins.
It's a small community, isn't it? And I hope we all look out for each other. And certainly I always try and sing for the little guys, and I count ourselves as the little guys as well. But it's a really exciting, it must be an exciting adventure to be re-embarking on, I guess, really. But I guess this brings us nicely to my first question. And like I say, if people aren't aware of Mouching, I wondered if you could give us a little bit of backstory of how that came about and how that started and how that has evolved and almost, I guess, come full circle, hasn't it?
Yeah, like when I started fishing, first I didn't know how to fly fish, and I was fascinated. I came to fly fishing by reading Jim Harrison's book and Thomas McGuane. I was into books, and then I was fishing, and I had some friends who came over for the opening day in southern France, and they had fly fishing rods, and I had a lure rod, and I saw them having so much fun. They caught less fish than I did, but they were laughing all the time, and I found there was something else, and I wanted to try. So I bought a rod, a fly fishing rod, and I learned on my own in my garden, and that's how it started. Then I read a lot about fly fishing, because this is how you do, I didn't know anyone but those guys who fly fished, and I wanted to know more. So I went to websites and blogs and forums, and they were really boring. You know, all they were talking about it was about technique, which is great, but it's shrinking our world. And so I went to, there was a French forum, and I was trying to write little stories about fly fishing because this is what I like. And they got really upset, and they said, basically, here we're there to talk about the size of the hook and the length of the tippet, and thank you very much. So I had a friend at the time I was fly fishing with, and I said, let's make our own. If we can't write stories, let's open the Mouching. And that was, I think, 12 years ago or 13 years ago. So we didn't know anything about websites. We had to learn. We opened the website, and it started like that. We were looking for a name because we didn't know what to say and how to call this thing. Because for us it was a thing. We didn't. It was just for us, you know. And in the building I was working at the time I was working in a radio in Paris called Radio Nova, which is like a radio that in the 80s and 90s brought African music, South American music, funk, hip hop, jazz. It was that kind of music. And there was in the same building a magazine called Le Fooding, which was a rebel magazine about food. That magazine was talking about all the restaurants with the good chefs, but that weren't starred. If you understand what I mean, like who didn't have like the recognition from the Guide Michelin. And I found that this approach to food was exactly what I wanted to have to fly fishing. So mouche is fly and in French. So we decided to call it the Mouching. And we had 50 readers. And that was amazing. And then suddenly we had 60 readers. All our friends, you know, were reading and subscribing to it. It was fantastic. And then one day a friend of mine said, but why don't you write in English? You know, what you're doing it was more like Molded Chum, you know, the American website. And we decided to write it in English. And we had, on the fly fishing fair, we got interviewed by a fly fishing magazine. And from 70 to 80 readers, we had 900 per week, then 200 per day, and then we have like 2,500 a day. And that was it. You know, we didn't know what was happening, and we were posting once a week, and then we started to post every day. And you know how life goes. We had people that came in and went out. We have, you know, I've been holding this like a monk. You know, it's really a monk's job. You know, there's no real reward, just pleasure. And unfortunately, I don't have much time to write anymore. So I take the shortcut and I put videos and music that I like. And I always write a few lines about more about what it does to my soul and what it does to us, rather than explaining how life goes, which is not very important while you're fishing.
Yeah.
I can go by the river and just sleep on a bed of moss and listen to the birds in the river itself than fishing. I don't care. It's just being out that's important.
Being there's enough, isn't it?
Yes, you know what I really realized. I realized what fly fishing meant to a lot of us is like 15 or 20 years ago. I woke up at 4 a.m. I drove to the river in the wee hours, started fishing. When I woke up at 4, I had an enormous breakfast because I knew I would have a long morning. And I've started fishing, and suddenly I got really hungry. Sorry, I got really hungry. I said, how can I be hungry? I had breakfast like 2 hours ago. It was 3 p.m.
Yeah.
Time had gone by. I didn't realize it. I was so into fishing, and that's what it does to us. It's like it's a time traveling. It's like we're in a capsule and nothing else matters. And to be able to fly fish correctly, you have to be like 200% in what you're doing. You can't think about problems. You can't think about anything else but what you're doing. And I think it's a way of meditating. It's a way of seeing things and taking ourselves apart from the real world. And we all need it. Well, I do.
Absolutely. And I know when I'm on the river, if I catch a fish and I start talking to the fish or I talk to my dog, I know that I've reached that level that you talk about, that you don't need, you've forgotten about everything. Your spirit, your soul has been recharged. Everything feels good and you feel at balance with everything and at one with everything. And like you say, that perfect cast that goes out and the fish takes it and everything happens. And like you say, you forget absolutely everything. And I think we were talking off mic beforehand, and I'm getting a sense that fishing, and you've got your finger on the pulse of fishing very much so, that we're seeing a little bit of a change in fishing, and lockdown, I guess, has been part of that how people are approaching, how they're thinking about fishing, how they're posting about fishing, that it is not just about that great big fish, it's about everything that goes with it. And you've alluded to it there. Are you sensing that as well, that people are saying, yes, it is the bigger picture that I'm realising how lucky I'm being part of?
Yes, and unfortunately, it's a gap between how do you call it? Young and I wouldn't say old and young people, but it's a gap in between generations. There's a whole in France, at least, there's a whole generation that has been fishing to feed, like when you're a kid or even like people. I remember that one guy, he told me he would not measure the amount of fish by the numbers of the fish he caught, but by how many sinks he filled with the dead fish he caught. And he would say, oh, today I filled 2 sinks, because that's where he was cleaning them. And today first, there's not as many fish because agriculture has been very mean to our rivers, since we all want to eat meat. Where I am from, like people it's a cattle land, and on a mountain called Aubrac, which is also a breed of cows, people would have like 50 cows. Now they have 150. And those cows, they produce manure, and the manure it's a wild mountain, so there's no pollution but agricultural pollution, and they spread the manure in the fields, and the fields are so steep sometimes that instead of spreading it, they stash it, and the manure goes in the river through the land, and it pollutes everything. And so there's less fish, and so we have to adapt ourselves. We can't bring fish every day, we can't eat fish every day, but we can have the pleasure of catching it and releasing it. And the young generation gets it, the older doesn't. And unfortunately, it's the older people who are maneuvering the Federation of Fly Fishers, of Fishery in France. So they still want to stock rainbows and put them everywhere so everybody can come back home with a fish, and which is not very good. We think it's better to put brown trout, local ones, and have them reproduce and helping the reproduction and having pieces of rivers that you can't fish because they're reproducing for several years, and then moving those beats to up the river or down the river. But unfortunately, it doesn't work like that. People want to consume rainbows. They want fish. That's all they want. The young generation is changing. There's a major change. We take care of agriculture. We see it differently. We look at what we eat. We look at what we wear. You look at what our cars are consuming. It's a change. There has to be a major change. And we were talking about Patagonia earlier, and the culture is changing to Patagonia is a very important leader in that field. The important is not what we use, is how we're changing our consumption use. Like consuming is the problem. It's not. It's reducing the way we travel, reducing the pollution, repairing things instead of buying new ones, recycling. It's not how can we shift from one way to another one, is how can we reduce our consumption. This is the important thing, I believe.
Yeah. And in France, tell me, do you have, because I've again sensed, and we've tried to do our little bit as well, that there is an upsurge to take on the pollution by water companies in the UK. It's led by, or the figurehead of as seen as this is Fergal Sharkey and everything that he's done to go after the water companies and the pollution. Is there similar sort of things? Of course, we've got the Wild Trout Trust, Salmon and Trout Conservation, and others too. Do you have that sort of groundswell behind what you're trying to achieve regarding pollution, the manuring of the fields and everything else? Do you have support for that?
We don't have much support, to be honest. We don't have much support. We do have support, but not enough. We mainly have support when there is, in '76 there was they voted a law in France which said the polluters will pay. If you pollute, you pay. Unfortunately, although this is the law, it's sometimes very difficult to make those. Let's say a farmer has a leak in his manure tank, and the manure goes to the water, to the river. Of course, he will get a fine. But then he will, he's a farmer, he's not very rich, he's doing his best, and he probably won't be able to pay the fine. So it's very difficult, because there are some very strong lobbies also with the milk in the companies, because the milking and cheese is a main polluters, especially in the eastern France, when on rivers like La Loue, which was one of the best French river for fly fishing, with amazing grayling and amazing trout. And unfortunately, they have a cheese called Comté, and everybody wants to eat that cheese. So the government supported the agriculture to have a lot of cows, and therefore manure, but also they have a lot of cheese factories, and those cheese factories unfortunately are polluting the rivers, even if they try not to. The Loue is almost dead because of that. So it's a catch-22. We're trying to save the rivers, and the state is saying, yeah, we'll help you, and on the other hand they help the ones who are polluting the rivers. And It's very difficult. It is very difficult. I don't see a very bright future for our rivers, although we're really trying. And it's what is terrible. It's that now we're more like saving what's left instead of trying to repair what can be fixed. Like in Brittany is very badly known for the pork industry and corn. Corn is terrible for our rivers because corn needs a lot of water and they use a lot of pesticides. And the pork industry, with the manure and all those problems, has killed the rivers in Brittany. Brittany was fantastic for salmon, for trout. Last year I was shooting a film in southern Brittany for French TV, and I was amazed by the effort that had been done to save the rivers. That everyone, the rivers were filled with trout. There was plenty of trout, not very big one, but there were plenty of fish. And they were telling me, yeah, we're lucky there hasn't been a pollution for 2 or 3 years, but there might be one next year. And this is an ongoing process. We're really caught between the hammer and the anvil.
Yeah, it's interesting what you were saying there as well about the farming, and I was just thinking about that in the amount of cows, and I think supermarkets have a part to play in that they're screwing down the price, so I guess the farmers have to produce more milk to try and make money. And we've even tried, I've noticed in our household, that we buy our milk direct from the farmer now. And so we get that, so we have to pay a little bit more, and I understand for some people it may not be as easy, but we've tried to cut that out. We buy our bread, we make our bread, we buy our bread from farm shops direct. We pay a little bit more, but we try and cut those out. And also with the water companies, and one of the fears that I've talked at the introduction with the rivers being high, that river companies will empty sewage tanks when the water's high. And
really?
If they get fined, if they're fined, the fines aren't big enough to deter the water companies. So it's part of their operating costs, so they will continue to do that. They are starting to listen now. The Environment Agency are getting stick from anglers, from surfers, from wild swimmers. So I'm sensing that is starting to change a little bit. It may take time, and that's the worrying thing, that it takes time to happen. And I don't know how much time that we do have, but we're trying, even as I said, as a household, to try and stop these things from happening or to alleviate those. And it would be great to see that to continue. And I hope that, led by yourselves and other people, that we get to see that, because we've got, and I'd like to talk a little bit more about those wonderful trout streams that you have in France and learn a little bit more about them. And we need to act, don't we, before it's too late?
Yes, but what the truth is that what's happening today, the movement of taking care of the planet started in '68. So it takes a bit of time, There were, the hippies at the time. That today we are in the position where we can change things. It takes time. It's going to take a very long time. But now, with the major companies and the help of everyone, that are switching their way of taking care of the planet, and not only taking but giving it back, is very important. But it's going to take time. It's unfortunately, I'm afraid it's going to take, regarding the rivers and the way people fish, not only the way they protect the rivers, but the way people fish, is going to take one generation to go away.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. It's the new fly fishing people, the people that are in their 30s and 40s and early 20s. for them to be in a position where they can really change something, it's going to take 10 to 15 years. But it's on the move, you know. It's on the move.
And that's where I think brings us to that point that you were making about, younger people being aware about the reach of what Le Mouching has to us to a degree, that we're trying to get people to think about those things. And I'm sensing, and that's what I was leading with that question, that there is a little bit of a change, isn't there, away from, just the fish. It is that environment. And like you say, it sounds as though it's going to take a bit of time, but those wheels are starting to turn now. And I guess we've all, as fly anglers and people who love the outdoors, have just got to continue pushing those and helping those wheels on their way, haven't we?
Yes, and it's exactly as I was saying before. It's what is Le Mouching, and what does the young generation want to hear? They don't. Of course, they want to hear about technique, but it's not all of it. When you're a car, when you go fishing, you talk about so many things. Everything happens in the car or at the pub, or when you're a friend. What are you talking about? We're talking about books. We're talking about films, we're talking about daily life, we're talking about music, and we're also talking about environment and what is good for us. Therefore, I felt that Le Mouching had to be like a loudspeaker to embrace all those ways of life. And it's mainly, although this is a way that keeps me young, I would say, but when I'm writing and when I'm finding something for Le Mouching, I'm digging and looking for something that would talk to my kids. My kids are in their early 20s, and I see their friends, and I see the guys I fly fish with who are in their 30s or 40s, and they're what drives them? What do they want? And this is what is Le Mouching. It's exactly as you were doing in your magazine. It's fly culture. It's a way of life. It embraces so much. It's not about the fish. It's about what allows us to catch a fish that's a wild fish in a wild environment without any pollution, whether it's mental or physical or water pollution.
Yeah, very, very good points. And you've talked a little bit about, because I'd like to understand a little bit more about, I'm embarrassed to say I've not done any fishing in France, and the sound of, the mountain streams and everything else. You've obviously got chalk streams there as well. And where you're based, do you have, what would you consider your home water, and how would you describe it to me?
So there's two things. Unfortunately, I'm based in Paris at the moment. I say unfortunately because you have to drive to go fishing, although driving is sometimes a pleasure. I'm caught between Paris, where I have to work, and where my kids are at school, and my wife works, and a house we have in a place called Aveyron, which is where they do the Roquefort cheese, and which is southern France. It's a place where there are mountains with cows, like it would look a bit like Scotland, and there are also the southern part of the what we call département, which is the I don't know, like Wiltshire or the place is more Mediterranean. So we have dark waters, and we also have limestone rivers. And fishing is fantastic. Fishing is fantastic because there's no pollution but agriculture, and that's on the mountain part. On the limestone part with the canyons of Gorge du Tarn and Gorge de la Dourbie, it's fantastic. It's clear blue water. Unfortunately, it's been fished a lot, and I was trying to have. It's like the same waters that you can have in Slovenia. If any of you have been to Slovenia, it's exactly the same. Unfortunately, we don't have as many fish. Outside of Paris, if you want to go fishing, the easiest way would be to go to Normandy, where we have chalk streams. And Normandy is the mayfly land, so it's fantastic starting now. Although this year is a bit dodgy and is a bit shifty because it's very cold at the moment. It's like 10 degrees, 12 degrees instead of being like 20, and it's raining a lot, which is very good because it hasn't rained. We didn't have water. We have serious drought in France, but it's chalk streams, a lot of private beats, which is a head game because you never know if you're in the local part where you can fish for free with a permit you buy yearly, or if you're in a private land and where people, in fact, what happened in private land, people stock fish and they sell cards per year, and it's pretty expensive. But it's fantastic. There's a lot of trout, and it's really nice. And the weather is very green. It's like England. It's the closest you can get as England, I would say. Maybe Wiltshire. And then Brittany is fantastic. Brittany is little rivers, lots of forests, plenty of trout, salmon, sea trout. It's the rivers are narrow, unless a few big ones, and people, because it's been polluted a lot with agriculture, as I said before, people are very careful about their rivers. They really take care of them. Then you have the east of France, which with the Loup River, which we call Franche-Comté, which is where Charles Ritz, and when he was not fishing in Normandy, he used to go fishing there. With it's people have been fishing this for centuries, and the trout in Franche-Comté are beautiful. There's zebra trout. There are lots of grayling, and unfortunately a lot of pollution due to cheese factories, but it's getting a little better. Then you have the Alps. The Alps, I would say, it's very dodgy, very difficult to fish because for us, when we have to drive there, you never know if the rivers are going to be overflowed with melting snow or if there would be not enough water in the rivers. But it's still one of the really nice places to fish. All the places in France that have mountains are obviously the ones we want to go to, because if there's mountains, sometimes in the valleys there's industry, but you go high up, you go on the headwaters, and it's totally wild. Then you have the Massif Central, which used to be very good for salmon because of the River d'Ordogne. Unfortunately, we have very few of them, or River Allier, but that was, for me, I'm over 60 and it's a dream, I heard people like talking about, oh yeah, when we were young, we used to drive from Paris 4 or 5 hours to go to fish salmon in the Allier River. And for me, this is like science fiction. It doesn't exist anymore, but there are plenty of streams filled with trout and grayling, and food is very important when you fly fish, and food is very good. Wherever you are in France, you can always find a place to eat late or before the last coup du soir. We call it coup du soir. How do you say in English? When the fish are going almost at night.
Evening rise.
Evening rise. Thank you. And then there's one place that is fantastic, which is the Pyrenees. And Pyrenees, there's salmon, there's trout, there are lakes. You can almost fish everywhere in France. It's just be ready sometimes not to catch as much as you would like or as big as you wish, but that's not really the point. The point is really to go and have fun and discover a country, driving in beautiful landscapes and having good food.
Yeah, that sounds my kind of trip.
Yeah, like 2 weeks ago, excuse me, I'm going to plug my computer because it's telling me I need food. I need a little electricity. Yes, 2 weeks ago I went to my country house, and unfortunately the weather was very bad. It was very cold and raining. Although the river levels we were in April and they were the same level as August, which is terrible. But there was no hatch. And a friend of mine who's a guide, a local guide, who's in his 30s, is a really fantastic kid. He used to be a chef, and he was he worked in very good restaurants, like starred restaurant, and he had enough, and he wanted to change his life, and he wanted to be he's a fly fisher, and he wanted to be a fly fishing guide. So he's there. His name is Baptiste Conquet, and he said, "Oh, I'm going to scout a river because I have to take customers and clients there in a couple of weeks, and I don't know it really well. Would you like to come with me?" And we drove south, it's a river that is between, maybe it'll ring to some of the listeners, between Montpellier and Béziers, which is exactly what we call the Midi, which means the south. It's like in the vineyards, and you don't expect to have a river there. It's like small mountains, and there is a dam, and the river is the water that's in the river is always the same level and always the same temperature, and it's filled with trout and grayling. It was so much fun. I was just like, it was a dream. I was in the country, the trees, the bushes, everything was Mediterranean, so it was not linked to fishing. There was some vineyards, and it wasn't linked to fishing either. But I was there in the middle of the water with my waders, catching trout and grayling that were rises, and like there were thousands of insects. It was bliss. It was fantastic. And at midday or at 1 o'clock, the guy said, "Oh, let's have lunch." And then he brought a basket, and there was pate, there was sausage, there was ham, there was cheese, there were cakes, there was food we could have stayed a week. It was fantastic. This is part of what we think in France is like, you can't go fishing without eating. It's not possible. And then once you had, of course, he had bottles of wine. So you open a bottle of wine with a friend, and they drank wine. I don't drink. And but then I had brought some real good coffee. We had coffee, and then I lit a cigar, and I have always cigars. I only smoke when it's worth it, and not only when it's worth it, but to smoke. It's like, for me, smoking a cigar is like enjoying fly fishing. I don't want anyone to bother me, and I don't want to bother others. So I rarely smoke in public, because there's always someone who looks at you and see you with a cigar and say, "Oh, what kind of prat is that guy?" Or or they hate smoking. No, nobody smokes around me, so I have to hide to smoke. My wife doesn't want me to smoke at home because she thinks it stinks, which I understand. So it was perfect. So that's when I decided to smoke, and it's part of something. It's part of happiness. That's what I would say. That fishing, food, and cigars are bringing something that makes me human and enjoying life as it is.
I think that sounds perfect day to me. And it's interesting you talk about the cigar thing, because generally I only smoke a cigar. I do have the occasional one at home, but on the river, and it seems right. And we've slipped in with friends I fish with, particularly this year, and my friends Warren and Duncan and Gerald. They bring, we almost sort of try and not outdo each other, but bring a really nice lunch and sit and eat lunch, talk about the world. And then it seems perfect just to smoke a good cigar afterwards. My friend Warren reconditions pipes, and he smokes some pipe, and we sit and do that sort of stuff. And that is, like you say, it's so much more. And I know we keep coming round on that, but it is, isn't it? And those moments are equally as important as that wonderful trout that has risen to a dry fly or eaten a nymph. It's everything that goes with that. And that, to me, that cigar moment sums it up perfectly, that it's been a good day so far. And it seems right just to have that. I've got a nice little buzz on after having had one as well. And everything is good with the world and feels right. And it's been really interesting listening to you talk with passion about those streams that you visit. And that one particularly sounds fabulous. And to me, I didn't realise grayling. And so it's been interesting to hear about grayling there. And also about salmon. And I wondered about salmon, like you say, the runs are becoming, I guess, fewer and fewer. Is there much of a salmon scene in France?
Yes, and there's, I would say, unfortunately, there are two cultures. In France, we have the people you can't fish salmon in France if you're a salmon fisher, because you never know. It's too difficult. It depends on the level of water. It's too difficult, and there's fewer and fewer salmon going up. The people who are fishing salmon, the real ones, they only fish salmon, and they travel. So we don't see them much. You know, it's another culture. I have a friend who moved to Pays Basque, close to Pau, only to fish salmon. He's settled there, and he's a guy. He's much older. He's in his 70s, and he told me that as a kid he would bring a salmon home. He would catch a salmon a week, and the people he fished with would catch a salmon a day. Now, he tells me that this year I caught 4 or 5 salmon. Now they're going into sea trout. They let go of the salmon, they go to sea trout. But there's a kind of shift between, when you go to a fly fishing store in Paris, which there's fewer now, there's only one real one. You have the guys who are buying flies or fly tying material, and then you have the salmon fishing people who are in a total different world. It's like riding a moped and people who are riding Harley Davidsons or something. It's a different club. Same thing, wheels and roads, and we're fishing with rods, but it's two different worlds, unfortunately.
Right.
Yeah, I'd like to speak about, what I organized. I was like not a guide, but I used to take people fishing in Cuba for a very long time. I started in my first trip to Cuba was for the music in and I was working for that Radio Nova in '92, and then I came back in '94, and from them I started going like several times a year, bringing people fly fishing. It was fantastic. It was amazing. It was totally wild, and it was very cheap compared to other places where you could do tropical fishing, and it was great. And every time I used to go to Cuba, I had one bag with my rods and gear, and one bag when I was there. On the way back, I gave away everything I had because nobody had anything. So I would give my shirts, my raincoat, my shoes, everything. And I had an empty bag to come back. And I would stash it with cigars. And at the time, the customs didn't really care. So I would buy like 2 years worth of cigars every trip. And that was where I really learned and enjoyed. I got the taste of cigars. And cigars have been... I was working in a film production company in Paris, and there was a guy who was always smoking a cigar, and told me once, he gave me a cigar, and I said, I don't know how to smoke. And I said, I'll teach you, but I'm not going to teach you. I'm going to send you to the person that will teach you. And he sent me to a cigar shop in Paris, where I went and I met Madame Nicole. And Madame Nicole taught me how to smoke. First, she sat with me and she asked me what I liked, what kind of food I liked, and then she gave me a cigar and said, you'll smoke this one. Then I would come back 2 days later or a week later, and she'd give me another one. And then she made my tastes in cigars. I owe a lot to Madame Nicole. And I thought it was very funny to go to have I had a teacher in cigar who was like a school teacher. It was Madame Nicole. She retired now, but I owe her a lot of pleasure. Thanks. Merci, Madame Nicole.
It's funny you should mention Cuba, and we'll come on to that actually. But my daughter went, and she came back with some Cohibas, and that spoilt me. And I've got one actually. My friends Andy and Yeva bought me one, and they said smoke it when you catch a 3-pound grayling. So I'm waiting for that special moment. It may be a long time. It may be that I have to use another excuse to smoke that particular Cohiba, but that's fantastic. But before going off down that wormhole, I wanted to talk to you about Cuba and the fishing there. And I'm obviously via the Mouching. I know about those trips and how special the fishing was there, and the permit and the bonefish and everything else. That's got a special place in your heart too?
Well, that's probably the best place I've fished in. First of all, I had the luck to be with a fishing company that would send me as a scout. Not really as a scout, but as a fake customer. They would find a place, they would make the deal, and then they would send me with other fly fishers just to test the place. I was one of the first ones. So and I'm fluent in Spanish, which makes me like, Cuba is like a home for me, and I get to link with the people. It's easy. Everywhere I fished was amazing for a couple of years, 3 years, 4 years. Then the pressure started. What was really good is that Cuba, all the fishing is owned by state, of course, but more of that, all the tourism and the fishing is owned by the army, because everything that has to do with boats is overlooked by the army, because you're not allowed to have a boat, because they're afraid that if you have a boat and gasoline, you will run away to the United States. So especially in the northern part, it's like you have to be at the harbor at 5 p.m. They check the amount of it's all those little things that are a bit bothering. But I went to places, and there was a Formula One Italian pilot called Fabrizio, who moved to Cuba 20 years ago and started developing fishing camps. He was the first one. So he started the fishing camps, and then the state will come with a stupid thing saying, oh, you have a license for fishing camps. You don't have a license for communication material. And the guy said, yeah, why? Well, when you're selling your fishing trips, you sell €100 worth of $100 worth of internet communication to your customers. So that makes you a provider of communication. So we'll take away your fishing license. And of course, they sold for more money to other companies. This is how it works. But this guy, Fabrizio, you're still in Cuba, was amazing because he scouted places that were fantastic. And every time I went fishing, it was just like when you were casting first there was like so much fish. I've never seen them so numerous. But they would come to see what was in the water. They heard something and they saw it, and they came. They all came. They were so, in Bahamas. I've been fishing in Bahamas. It's not the same. In other places, the fish, they hear the engine and they go away. Like the fish were curious. They were coming, and the guides. I had the special link with the guides because I would speak Spanish to them all the time. I would give presents to them. I would give them whatever I had because they had nothing. I was with a customer on a skiff boat, and at the end of the day, I was giving all my flies. The only thing I was keeping was my rod and my reel, and I was giving away not only all the gear I had, but I was tipping the guy seriously. And the customer said, "Oh, why do you do that?" I said, "But they don't have anything to live with, And the guy said, "Oh, he has Costa glasses, he has a Patagonia shirt, he has Sims boots." And I said, "Yes, of course, because somebody gave them to him. It's not, they can't afford that. It doesn't come. There's no Sim stores. There's no Patagonia shop. There's no, Costa glasses stores in Cuba. Everything has to be given away, and the more you give, the more you receive. This is how it works, And Cuba was fantastic for that because you fished, it was easy. And I took my wife fishing in Cuba, and that's the first time she fly fished. And of course, she got thrilled and she got into fly fishing because she caught bonefish, she caught numerous bonefish, caught barracuda, and on the first week, if you want to fly fish and catch fish, like to have fun and to hook you, in France it's very difficult because there are not as many places where you can cast and fish instantly unless you go to fisheries and reservoirs. But no, it's part of a whole. Unfortunately, when Mr. Obama opened the borders with Cuba, all the fisheries, the fishing camps rose their prices. Before you could go to Cuba and for like the whole package would cost you $3,000, $3,200, all included. And now we're talking more around 8 or 6. So, of course, there are people going to Cuba, but not everyone can go. That's what I'm saying. And it's a shame because it's fantastic. And this is, it's really weird because when I was organizing these trips in Cuba, I really saw two kinds of fishermen. There are people I was getting at the airport And I was saying, oh, I organized a dinner for you, just for arrival dinner in a secret restaurant where we're going to have fun. And then we're going to go to the hotel. Then tomorrow morning, we're going to leave, take the bus, go to the fishing spot. And spend at least a day in Cuba to visit. They were not interested. They said, no. We want to eat at the pizza at the hotel and head to the fishing camp as soon as possible. And then on the way back, they went straight to the flight and didn't care at all about the country. And that was for me, it was heartbreaking because I felt that they were missing so much. And other ones, it was the opposite. Other ones, I met some guys that were thrilled by Cuba, that extended their stay. They stayed 1 week for fishing and 1 week visiting the country. And that was fantastic. But this is who we are, there are several kinds of fishermen, there are several kinds of people. We're not all the same. And some of us get along together and others don't, but they will find some other people, they will get together and have the same view about fishing. It's all about sharing our view of fishing.
Yeah, I've got a wry smile on my face because I've hosted trips on saltwater destinations, and what you were saying was kind of interesting, and some of the most nerve-wracking thing, I don't know if you've been through the same, is when the boats come in at the end of the day and you're thinking, please everyone had a good day, please I hope everyone's had a good day, because sometimes you get the people who are not always enjoying the whole experience. They're there to catch a fish, and if they haven't caught that fish, then and have you been through that yourself too?
Oh, it's the worst. It's funny you mentioning this. The worst memories I've had is the permit fisher. I went fishing with people who only wanted to catch permit. It was their one target. They were just on permit. I actually made a film with Paris Filizanis from This Is Fly magazine in the United States. We went to Mexico and just for permit. And, there was no permit, so we did something else. But we caught little ones. But I went on 2 fishing trips in Belize and Mexico, where people had flown there only to catch permit. And it was hell on earth. The guys were frustrated. They were angry. You couldn't talk to them. They were just like, it was hell. Honestly, it was just like, I couldn't see how they could enjoy that. Permit, I caught several permits. And the first one I caught was in Cuba in 94. There was a school of bonefish, and it was in the milk. So I was blind casting, and I got a permit. And the guide was, it was enormous. It was a big one. It was fantastic. And I didn't realize what was happening because I didn't make any effort to get it. It was not, to me, it was just luck or fluck and whatever. It was. And then one day I caught a 27-pound permit in Mexico, and it was on site, and that was something totally different, and I remember it forever. But for me, shooting for stags, I can understand. Going across the world just to catch one fish, the permit, is too difficult. It's like I hear people going. Once I was in Cuba with. This is a very very funny story, and that will tell you why I don't fish for salmon. I was with a Dutch guy. He was sweet guy. He was like he was at the time he was in his 70s, and he was going to all the concerts around the world with the Rolling Stones, and he was Led Zeppelin fan. He was a nut character, and I asked him what he did as a living, and the guy said, "I'm a painter. I paint buildings." And I happened to have the deal like 20 years ago with the city of Amsterdam to paint all the buildings of the city. Now I have a company, my kids run it, and I fly fish around the world. And the guy, he goes on the Gaula River in Norway for 2 months every summer. He's very rich. And he said to me, you know, your fishing gear, you have to use it. I have reels on my shelves that I never use. And it's a shame. It's a real shame. I have like all the art reels, you know, I don't know if you know this brand Art. I have all the models. I never fish with them. I have the models from Billy Pates. I don't, you know, anyway. And the guy said to me, never, ever go salmon fishing. I said, why are you saying that to me? He said, it's like heroin. You try it once, you can never let go. And then you suffer all your life and you spend all your money. You go to countries to fly fish and it costs you like 20,000 euros or 10,000 euros and there's no rain and the fish doesn't go up the river and you're stuck with idiots that only are angry because they don't fish. Don't ever do that in your life. And I've been listening to him.
Lovely. Love that story. We've been talking over an hour now, Cyril, and I'm going to start winding things up, but I wanted to, this is a silly question because I know the answer and the conversation we had before we started recording. Are you enjoying fishing as much as you always have?
You know, when I started fishing, I fished like crazy. I would fish nonstop. I was driven by fishing. And it was more, then I caught a fish, you know. I remember my first fish on a dry fly. Very small trout came up, saw it in the stream. It was just like, I couldn't believe what I saw. Then I wanted to catch as more fish as I could. Then I wanted to travel to go to places where other people don't go. Then I wanted to catch the biggest fish. Now I have a very serious job now in Paris, which doesn't allow me to fly fish as much as I want. Lucky me, I'm because of the Mouching and the way of thinking and the way of fishing, I make a feature, not a documentary, a 1 hour documentary a year to balance the technical fly fishing films and the Mouching fly fishing films, which are, as you heard, like more on the way of life. And so when I go fishing, it has to be pleasure. You know, this is how I dedicate, you know, and just going fishing is enough. You know, I dream about fishing all the time, of course. I'm obsessed with fishing because we're all fly fishermen are obsessed with it. But I don't go as much. You know, that's like, if I could, maybe when I retired, I will go every day if my legs allow me and I'm in good health. But yes, what I dream about is to go back to Cuba with my wife and my kids, but to the Cuba I knew, not to the Cuba made for American fly fishing, because this has ruined everything. No, this is what I like my friends. I love my friends. And I love to go fishing with them. And I make new friends all the time. So it's an ongoing process. And I love to see my friends fishing. I love to see them catch a fish. I spot the fish for them and I'll tell them where it is. And that's my pleasure. Almost as much as for me to catch the fish itself.
Yeah, Yep, I'm with you on that. That makes perfect sense. Cyril, it's been wonderful to catch up with you. If people haven't found Mouching, how can they get hold of the site? And are you able to say a little bit more about the magazine? Obviously, I will do everything my end to help promote that as well, and I wish you every success with that too.
Yeah, I think the Mouching is, you just type Mouching, Mouching. It's bilingual. You click on the, unfortunately, I think it's an American banner, but it's English and French. And I do the translation myself, or I write myself in English. So it's not perfect English, but it's the best, it's understandable. And it's all about films now, mainly films and gear and things and music, because what's fishing without music and what's life without dancing? It's mainly the music. You won't find heavy metal things like, it's more fun music. For now, maybe if someone in the team makes a mixtape with metal music, we'll have the metal heads listening to it and going like that. But we're more into Cuban, jazz, blues, funk, hip hop. That's where I'm from, so that's where my heart belongs to. So I listen to what I like, and I like to share it with you.
Fantastic. Well, I've thoroughly enjoyed reading everything, and it's been great. Cyril, just talking with you, I know I've always felt an affinity with what you're doing, and talking with you today, you feel exactly, if I were being interviewed, I'd be saying exactly the same things. It's been wonderful to see how passionate you are about the environment, about the resource, but also your view on fishing I share wholeheartedly. And I hope when things are a little clearer that we're able to fish together, because I would very, very much look forward to that.
Oh, yeah, of course. I hope you can come and fish in France as soon as possible. And I'm waiting for the new issue, the latest issue of your magazine that I've seen that's already sold out. And congratulations for that. Fantastic.
Thank you very much. And I wish you every success as you go into print as well. Cyril, it's been wonderful having you as a guest today. Thank you so much for talking with me on the Fly Culture podcast.
Thank you very much, Pete, for having me. Cheerio.
Thanks, everyone, for listening to the Fly Culture podcast. I hope you've enjoyed this one. We've headed across the channel, and it's been a fascinating chat. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as me. As ever, plenty more to come. So thank you so much for listening to the Fly Culture podcast. Fantastic.